Herzlich willkommen zu Tag 5 der Bewusstseinswoche Essstörung 2018 unter dem Motto Zeit zu reden. Und passend zu diesem Motto habe ich mit Anita Johnston, der Autorin des Buches Die Frau, die im Mondlicht aß, ein Interview geführt auf Englisch. Ich hoffe, das ist für dich kein Problem. Ich hoffe, du verstehst alles. Wenn danach Fragen sind, dann melde dich auf jeden Fall, egal auf welchem Kanal. Und jetzt wünsche ich dir erstmal ganz viel Spaß.
I'm so grateful to talk to you and to get to know a little bit more about the background of your book and also about the background of the Treatment Center, because I think it's an amazing and important approach for eating disordered people and also for the whole society. I think it's important to spread your message, I think, and also to spread your words with the German-speaking countries. And I met your book, I think, I'm not sure. I met
Was
your
it in English or in German, the book?
Oh, I've read it in German. Yeah. Do you think there's a difference between the book in English and in German?
I don't know because I can't read German.
Yeah.
But I did have a friend who read it and said, no, it's pretty much the same. I think the title is a little different.
Yeah, it's
Woman Who Eats in the Moonlight or something like that in German.
Yeah. But it's kind of the same meaning like in English.
Yeah.
So it's very similar. So it's a good translation, I think. Yeah, I think the listeners would be very, very, very interested in getting to know where does this book come from. When did you start to think about to write these texts and to write these words into a book like this?
Well, it started. Oh my! First of all, it took me 10 years to write it.
Oh, you wrote over 10 years?
Yes, because it started. I started writing it probably 1990, probably about around 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with my private practice, and I was working with women and girls who struggled with all kinds of eating difficulties. And I remember sitting there trying to explain some concepts, and they would say, well, where can I read more about this? And I went, I don't think the book has been written. And the funny thing is I never considered myself a writer. In fact, in my family, it was a joke. If you got a letter from Anita, frame it, because there aren't going to be very many. So it started off, I just was going to write a little booklet for my clients. And then it just grew and grew. And so it was really over a period of 10 years. And I just sharing some of the ideas that I was coming up with from really listening to them and then trying to look at things in a different way.
Yes, yeah. So do you think it's a different way to look at eating disorders by myth or do you say myth and fairy tales?
Myth and metaphor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the difference between maybe the understanding you had before and afterwards you were working with myth and fairy tale? What's the difference between these both or different understandings of eating disorders, or to talk about it?
Well, I think the way in which the metaphor and the fairy tales is useful is that it gets to the deeper meaning. So I think what's different is that when you're working with eating difficulties, after a while you start to understand that you're working with paradox, where so eating difficulties are about food and they are not about food.
Yeah.
And so what what's tricky is, okay, it's easy to get to the food piece. It's like, okay, what's someone doing with food? But it's a little more tricky to get to those underlying issues. How do you get to what is driving the disordered eating behaviors? What's pushing the disordered eating thoughts? And so to get to that, you have to get to almost like the universal experience of being human. And where the deeper meaning is for someone. And so after, I've been working now for 35 years in this field, and I don't even really believe in eating disorders per se. And what I mean by that is, certainly I understand the pain and the difficulty and even the life-threatening issues around that. No, make no mistake about it. That's very real. But that's only a small part of the story. There's way more to that story. And so I've started to look at it. And if you look at it by zooming the lens way out, what you start to see is that if somebody is restricting their food, that's not the only thing they're restricting in their life. They're restricting their emotions. They're restricting intimate relationships. They're restricting new experiences. They're always putting themselves on restriction if they make a mistake. So this theme of restriction is everywhere in their lives. And if somebody is struggling with binging and purging or yo-yo dieting, what you'll see is this pattern of someone who takes on too much and then gets overwhelmed and has to get rid of it. So that can happen with classes in school. You take on a lot of classes, then it's too much and you drop out. Or it may be projects, where you start a lot of projects and then quit them all because it's just too much. Or it could happen in relationships where you meet someone and fall madly in love, and then a few weeks later you discover something about them you don't like and you end it. Or you see what I'm saying? That pattern is everywhere. And with somebody who's struggling with compulsive eating or binge eating, you'll see this theme of scarcity throughout their lives. It's not just that there's never enough food, but there's never enough coffee. There's never enough time. There's never enough money. There's never enough attention. So this scarcity theme of there's never enough, or I am not enough, is everywhere. And so the good news is that when you address those deeper patterns, the healing occurs way, way beyond the struggle with food and spreads throughout their lives. And so, I believe, because I've seen it happen for thousands of women, I believe in total, complete recovery from eating disorders. You can totally, completely recover. However, in order to do that, you have to get to the underlying issues. And these underlying issues are the patterns. And the way I get to those patterns is through story and metaphor, because the patterns are unconscious. And what that means is they're out of your awareness. So how do you find them? And so that's why I work with the stories to help people. It quickens something inside of them, and they go, oh, yeah, I can see how this is connected.
Yeah. Is there, do you use different stories or metaphors depending on the types of eating disorders? Or does it, is there any connection between the type of an eating disorder to the stories you work with?
Some of the metaphors are a better fit because there's certain elements in them that might fit if someone is restricting or if they're eating compulsively or whatever. But by and large, what the stories are designed to do is to introduce the idea that there is deeper meaning here. You're not just doing whatever you're doing because you're stupid or broken or damaged goods. That there's something inside of you that you're attempting to express, but it comes out through eating behaviors in a misguided attempt to express. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. This is my favorite metaphor because it's everybody's favorite metaphor. That's what makes it my favorite.
I'm excited.
People all over the world telling me that this one metaphor helped them understand things differently. And also a lot of family members, when I share this with them, they go, oh, I get it. I understand something here. So I'll say it right now.
Yeah.
And with these metaphors, you're using your imagination. You're using the capacity to create inner images in your mind's eye, which is actually what is needed for recovery as well. So it's a way of cultivating that aspect of your psyche. So imagine you're on the banks of a raging river. It's pouring down rain and you slip and you fall in and you're drowning. You're getting pulled down through the rapids. And along comes a big log and you grab on. And the log saves your life. It keeps your head above water when surely you would have drowned. And eventually, it carries you to a place in the river where the water is calm. And from there, you can see the riverbank. But because you're holding so tightly onto the log, you can't swim to the riverbank. So the irony is, the very thing that saved your life is now getting in the way of you going where you want to go in life. So this is the metaphor that the log is the eating difficulty. and it's important to understand that it has served a function in your life, a very important function. And it would be important that you find out what that function is.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's always a little more complicated because there's usually somebody on the riverbank yelling, "Let go of the log, let go of the log." And you feel like an absolute idiot because you can't let go of the log. Yeah. Now, the way I see it is that letting go of the log may not be the very best thing to do initially. Because what if you let go of the log, swim to shore, and get halfway there and realize, oh, I don't have the strength and confidence to make it. That means you're really sunk, because that means you're not going to be able to make it back to the log either. And so I believe we all have a wise part of ourselves that will not let us let go of anything until we're ready. I don't care if that's the best eating disorder specialist in the country or the person who loves you more than life itself. We don't let go of anything if we're not ready. Now, so it's important to understand that part of the process. So then what do you do? Well, let go of the log and try floating. And as soon as you start to sink, grab back on. And then you let go of the log and you try treading water. And when you get tired, you grab back on. And then you let go of the log and you swim around it once. Grab back on. Twice. Grab back on. 10 times. 100 times. 200 times. Whatever it takes for you to have the strength and the confidence to let go. And then you can let go. So that metaphor also introduces the idea that this can take some time, because there are skills that a person needs to develop in order to deal with the emotional currents and that life sends our way. And so what I've found is that people who struggle with eating difficulties are typically very emotionally sensitive individuals, which I happen to think is a wonderful quality. I think our world would be in a lot better shape if more of our world leaders had the empathy and compassion that comes with being very sensitive. However, most of us live in a world that doesn't value emotional sensitivity, that doesn't teach us how to work with our intuition. So we end up thinking that there's something wrong with us. But there's nothing wrong with you, but there is a difficulty in being an emotionally sensitive, highly intuitive individual in a world that doesn't teach you how to work with that and doesn't value that. And so someone who's emotionally sensitive, what might not be a big deal to someone else penetrates their very bones. They feel things deeply. So that requires a certain skill set. You have to learn how to navigate that level of emotional sensitivity. And so what happens is somebody discovers along the way that if they develop an eating difficulty of some sort, where they're obsessing about food or their weight all the time, that in a way it distracts them from feeling like there's something wrong with them, because that's the fundamental belief.
Yeah.
And so, but the problem is, I don't know if you have this term in Germany, but it's an English term called the red herring. And it comes from a long time ago when they used to have fox hunts. And there's a story where someone wanted to win the fox hunt. So what they did is they took a herring that was already dead and smelly, and they dragged it along this trail, thinking that the dogs that in the fox hunt would follow that trail and never find the fox, and so they would lose. So the term red herring means when there's a distracting element, something that's taking you away from really where you're trying to go. And so with eating difficulties, food and weight is the red herring. And if you chase after that, the real problems never get resolved. And the real problems can be complex, like maybe you have a love-hate relationship with your mother, or maybe your boyfriend just dumped you, or maybe you don't know how to make friends, or maybe you're on a career path that doesn't work for you. But if you can, these require a complex set of skills to resolve. But if you can convince yourself that the problem is you're too fat and you need to lose weight, then that becomes the focus. But because it's not the real problem, it never gets resolved. And so it goes on and on and on. So the task is, and this is getting back to the metaphor in the stories, is to help people understand that there is something else that needs to be addressed, that is connected to whatever the eating difficulty is.
Yeah. Why do you think it's easier to understand for people with eating disorders to understand the complex, and it is a complex system, why do you think it's easier to understand it talking in stories and metaphors?
Okay. Because you're using a different part of your brain. So when I first started doing this, I didn't understand that. All I knew was that it worked. And what would happen is I would see what I called the lights going off in someone's eyes. Something would click. They would get it quickly, not taking years and years and years. They would get it immediately. Well, now they've been doing research. And so what the neuroscientists have discovered is, and the discovery started in the 1990s, but now they can actually locate where in the brain. So what's going on is, normally, like you and I right now, we're usually using mostly the left side of our brain, which is logical and linear. And but when you go with stories and metaphors, you go into the right side of your brain. And that's the place that what they've discovered is you can make connections between things that seem unrelated. So and actually now what they see happens is when somebody gets a metaphor or has an insight like that, there's a place right over your right ear. It's called the anterior superior temporal gyrus, long word.
Okay.
And it shoots off a blast of gamma waves, which is the highest electrical frequency in the brain. And that's how new neural pathways are created in the brain. So you actually literally are having a different experience when you're using more of the right side of your brain. So when you get stories and metaphors, rather than simply using words, you are creating imagery. And it's imagery in the mind of the listener or the reader. And so it's activating that part that can find hidden solutions to problems that normally seem intractable or impossible to solve. Isn't that cool?
It's interesting. It's so interesting. Really, it's so interesting. And what would be, or my interest would be to know, how did you select the stories you've chosen for the book? How did you select?
Well, there was some that I just knew, and so I could just see the connection. But after I had written my book, I didn't have that many stories in it. I had some metaphors, but my editor said, well, we need more stories. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to find the stories that fit these concepts? Yeah. So I went to the library and went to the children's section. And honestly, what happened is sometimes a book would fall out of the shelf and land on my foot. And I would pick it up and go, what's this? And I go, oh, I can see how this story can fit. But there have been other times because my daughters, I had 2 little girls and they're now grown women, but they went to Waldorf school, which in Germany you call them Steiner schools.
Okay.
Yeah, and so all the things that they were learning, the teaching was through stories. And so my kids would come home from school and they would tell me, oh, we learned this story about Prince division and Prince multiplication. And I went, oh, if I had learned my math in that way, I might know something today. So I started realizing, oh, I can use stories to teach these concepts to my clients. And so I started reading a lot of fairy tales and folk tales. And as I would read them, I was looking, okay, I can see how this is a connection. So I just started looking through different, fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen, and reading and then seeing, where was the deeper meaning? Because the deeper meaning applies to all situations.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like to go back to your favorite story or fairy tale. I really, really like this fairy tale because I think that many eating disordered people can see themselves in the story and can kind of identify their patterns and their inner voices with this action in the fairy tale and what happens in this fairy tale. And that's why I really like it.
Yeah, it's close enough, but not too close.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can be talking about a struggle that maybe you don't even want to look at. But if you're looking at the struggle in terms of the characters in the story, it's easier to look at and go, oh, I can see that.
Yeah. Do you also use it for working with the body? Or is it a work you can use for any part of the eating disorder?
Yeah, I do with the body. In fact, I can tell you a story if you want to hear a fairy
tale.
So this is my favorite story. It's not in the book, Eating in the Light of the Moon. Mm-hmm. I do have it in my online course, The Light of the Moon Cafe. Mm-hmm. But I learned this story after I had written the book. So the story is and it's a terrible story in the sense that it's if this story were a movie, I wouldn't go see it.
Oh, okay.
Because there's violence.
I'm scared.
Okay. But when it's a story, you can adjust yourself, right? So the story is there was once this king, and he had gone on a hunting expedition, and he had been gone for quite some time and was very successful. But as the hunting party returned and they galloped into the courtyard of the castle, they were greeted by the king's most loyal companion, the king's best friend, who always accompanied him. His dog that he had raised from the time she was a puppy. But something strange happened. As the dog approached the hunting party, it started barking and snarling and spinning around and running away. And then coming back and barking and snarling and spinning around and running away. And the king said, oh my gosh, I've been gone so long, my dog's gone mad. So he chased after the dog through the corridors of the castle. And then the dog stopped abruptly at the entrance to the nursery of the king's firstborn and snarled and barked and spun around. And to his horror, the king saw the dog's muzzle was covered with blood. And when he stepped into the nursery, he saw the walls were splattered with blood. And across the way, there was his infant child's cradle overturned. He was so furious at the betrayal of his best friend that he pulled out his sword and plunged it into the dog's heart. Immediately, there was a cry across the room, and he ran over, and there, beneath the carcass of a dead wolf, was his infant child, totally unharmed. Now, this is a horrible story. And all of us, when we hear this story, we go, oh my gosh, because initially we identify with the king. We know what it's like to say or do something, then go, oh my God, what did I do? I should have at least pushed the pause button to see, I could have averted this tragic thing, this terrible thing that I did. So we've all in some ways done something and just gone, oh, oops, I wish I had waited just for a minute. But in these stories, all the different characters represent different characters in our psyche. So who is the dog? The dog represents our bodies, our closest companion, our best friend, our most loyal companion that will be with us from the day we are born until the day we die.
Yeah.
But what happens is we don't appreciate that. And then when something goes wrong, we immediately blame our bodies, not consciously. We go, oh my God, I lost that job because I'm too fat, or that guy's not going to like me because my butt's too big, or we attack our bodies mercilessly. We blame our bodies for everything. Now, in the story, who's the wolf? Who's the real culprit of our pain and our suffering? It's our inner critic. The part of ourselves that will just plunge the knife into the heart of our bodies and say, and just prey on our most precious self, the infant. The infant child represents that part of ourself that is most unique. There's never been an Anita on this planet like me before, and never will be another one. Some people say that's a good thing. But it's for you. There's never been another Kira like you, and will never be another one. And also for every single one of our listeners, the most unique part of our being, our inner critic, is constantly preying on it. And what happens? We blame our bodies. We attack our bodies. And so, and not only that, but that wolf, it runs with a whole pack of media wolves that does the same thing, that says, oh, if you look a certain way, then you'll be happy. And it's so not true, but we believe it. And so that's how I would use a story to help somebody understand that when you're struggling with negative body image, the real problem is not the size and shape of your body. Yeah. The real problem is that critical voice inside of you that is telling you that there's something wrong with you because of your body.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's an example of how I'd use a story.
Yeah. It's a sad story, but on the other side, it's a beautiful story because you can get to know yourself and the meaning of the body from another perspective, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. If I was to tell you straight up, your body's fine, and everyone has different body sizes and body shapes, and this is the body God gave you, and blah, 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 it would not have the same impact because I'm talking to the left side of your brain instead of the right side of your brain, where you can really get to the deeper meaning of things.
Yeah, yeah. And we were talking about patterns and body, and I think every individual or every human being with an eating disorder, there's a deeper root somewhere. Somewhere is always a deeper root behind all these patterns and body images and everything we recognize, but maybe cannot feel it. Wow. But can you see, or can you describe maybe a process getting to this root?
Yeah.
Or is there a process? Or?
Yeah, there's a process. I'm happy to share that with you and your listeners. So again, you use your imagination because we're going in another side of your brain, right?
Yeah.
So imagine 2 tanks. Tank A, tank B. Tank A is the tank you fill when you need physical nourishment, and you fill it with food. Tank B is the tank that you fill when you need emotional or spiritual nourishment. And you fill it with what I call soul food, which is attention, appreciation, acknowledgement, meditation, prayer, and so forth. But the problem is that most of us think there's just one tank. So before we know it, tank A is full and overflowing, and we're still hungry. Or we don't even want to begin to fill tank A because it's like the bottomless pit, and we think it'll never end. So you have to tease the 2 tanks apart and recognize them as different. How do you do this? You do it through proprioceptive awareness, which is really just body awareness. You have to learn what your physical hunger and fullness feels like, because you have to understand there's lots of different kinds of hunger. And so tank A is about physical hunger, and you have to rule it out. And so to do that, like I might ask my clients, okay, what is the physical sensation that tells you are hungry, and where in your body do you feel it? And they might say something like, oh, I get lightheaded and dizzy, or my stomach growls. No, that's not hunger.
No.
It's famished. And what's going to happen if you wait to eat until you're famished? You're going to overeat. You're going to eat everything you can get your hands on because the signal is loud and your response is going to be loud. So the sensation for hunger is a whisper, not a shout. And it's very subtle, and it's physical. So it's a contraction or an expansion, a heaviness, a lightness, a roughness, a smoothness, a hollowness, or a density, or a coolness, or a warmth. You see what I'm saying? It's a physical sensation. I feel like pizza is not a physical sensation, right?
Not really.
So finding this is really important. And the way you do it is you go, if let's say all you know is lightheaded, dizzy, your stomach's growling, you know that's famished. Okay, but begin with that. Take 2 bites. Then you ask yourself, am I still hungry? If the answer is yes, you say, how do I know I'm still hungry? And then you look in your body for a physical sensation. And you might say, oh, I still feel kind of lightheaded. Okay, take 2 more bites and ask yourself, am I still hungry? If the answer is yes, you say, well, how do I know I'm hungry? Oh, well, my stomach's really growling. Okay, 2 more bites, and you keep going 2 bites at a time until the answer is no, I'm not hungry. Then you ask yourself, how do I know I'm not hungry? And a lot of times when I ask people, excuse me, I might say, what's the physical sensation for fullness? And where in your body do you feel it? And they'll say, oh, it's hard to breathe, or I have to unbuckle my belt. No, that's stuffed. And what's going to happen if you eat until you're stuffed on a regular basis? You're going to be a body size that's not your natural body size. So the sensation for fullness also is very subtle. It's a whisper, not a shout. It's a contraction or an expansion, a heaviness, a lightness, a roughness, a smoothness, a stillness, a movement, a coolness, a warmth. So this is an exercise that I have people do to learn their hunger and satiety signals. It's really important because that's how you tell the difference between tank A and tank B. So let's say you learned it. You find, and it takes a while. I remember one time I had a client and she came running in and she was waving a candy bar, half of a candy bar. And she goes, look, I found it. And I'm looking, wait, what? And she goes, oh, well, I was eating this candy bar, and then I felt my physical fullness, and so I put it back. I wrapped it up and put it back in my purse to eat again when I was hungry later. So and I said, oh, well, what is the sensation for you? And she said, well, I feel this dense contraction right here, and she pointed to her belly. It's different for different people. One person said, well, I got my hunger signal. And I said, well, what is it? She goes, it's a little tickle, and it's right here. And so for each of us, it's different. Yes. But it's a worthwhile exercise to learn to find your hunger and satiety signals. Because that's what you're going to use the rest of your life. Because you have this mechanism inside of you, that can tell you, it can calculate how much exercise you've had and how much sleep and where you're at in your menstrual cycle and what's going on with your metabolism. And all you have to do is read the printout. So this is the printout, finding your hunger and satiety signals. So let's say you did it. You found them. You know what they are. And so you're reaching for the piece of pizza and you check in. Not a hunger signal in sight. So you know it's not tank B. Guess what? You have just fallen down Alice in Wonderland's rabbit hole and landed smack dab in tank B. And in tank B, this is the world of metaphor. And pizza is not pizza. Food is not food. What is it? It's a concrete physical symbol of another kind of hunger that you are experiencing and may not even know about. So now we're getting to the metaphor, the deeper meaning. So the question to ask yourself, the first question is, what's the feeling I'm trying not to feel? Because you said, not eat for emotional reasons. We eat because we don't want to feel our emotions. We don't quite know what to do with them. So you might ask yourself, what's the feeling I'm trying not to feel? And then you think about your day. Am I still mad at the person who cut me off with their car when I was driving down the road? About a conversation I have to have with my child's teacher. Or maybe I'm upset about something my boss said. Or my husband did. And you start looking to see, where is there a feeling that maybe I'm trying not to feel? But I have to tell you, more often than not, when you ask that question, the answer is going to be, I don't know. I feel fine. Everything's okay. Because remember, the feeling is buried. It's unconscious. It's out of your awareness. So here's where the fun begins. And this is the good news. The food will tell you. The food that you are wanting to eat is going to tell you, or the food that you're afraid to eat will tell you what is really going on, because it's talking to you. But it's talking to you in code, and you have to crack the code. And the code is metaphor. And so it works something like this. And I'm going to let your listeners know, they don't have to write this down. They can go to my website, lightofthemooncafe.com/SF. There's a PDF they can get, and this is all written down, but I'm going to tell it to you now. So here's how you crack the code. And again, it's different for different people, but this is just to get you started thinking in these ways. Sweet foods usually have to do with either feeling like there's not enough sweetness in your life, or you're not sweet enough. Crunchy, salty foods typically are connected to unexpressed anger and frustration. Warm foods are usually associated with a craving for emotional warmth, like soups and stews. And spicy foods are typically connected to either a desire for or a fear of excitement, stimulation, and change. And chocolate sex and romance. So the way this works is when you can understand and start to break the code, you can listen carefully to the way you might describe these foods, and they will give you clues as to what the real issues are. So, for example, I had a client I was working with, and she struggled with bulimia. And I had asked her, I said, okay, if there's one food that you wished that you could eat and have no consequences, not have to worry about any consequences, what food would that be? And she said, oh, it would be vanilla ice cream with strawberries on top. And I said, okay, I want you to imagine I've never had vanilla ice cream with strawberries on top. And I want you to describe it to me. What's so wonderful about it? And she said, well, it's smooth, it's sweet, it's smooth, and it's refreshing. Now, when we started looking at what was going on in her life, her boyfriend was accusing her of not being sweet enough. She'd hit a really rough patch with her parents that she was desperately wanting to smooth out. And she was in a dead-end job in need of a refreshing change. There it was, all in the food. So sometimes it's in the language of the food, the language that we use. So it might be a little different in Germany because you may have different ways of describing different foods. But there was a woman who she struggled with compulsive eating, and she came into my office really, really upset. She was an emergency room physician, and she said, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I did. It's so terrible. And I went, whoa, what did you do? And she said, well, I was working at an emergency room, and then I came home and I fixed some chicken tenders for dinner for my husband and myself. And before he got home, I ate them all myself. And oh my gosh, I'm so disgusted. And she was going on and on. I said, wait, let's stop a minute. Wait, so you were working in the emergency room, what, 12, 14-hour shift? She said, yeah. I said, and you were tending to all kinds of emotional and physical trauma. And she said, yeah. And I said, so what do you think you were really hungry for? And we had worked together for quite a while. And so she said, a hug. I said, oh, you wanted some tender, loving care, some TLC, and instead you ate the chicken tenders. Now, because this had meaning for her, because it fit, it popped. I could see the lights go on in her eye. Yeah. Now, this woman will never be able to eat chicken tenders when she is not hungry without first checking, oh, do I really need a hug instead? If she's physically hungry, chicken tenders is just chicken tenders. But it's when she's not hungry that it holds the meaning. So I'll give you one more example. There is a woman, I do a lot of online sessions. So here is a woman in London that I was working with. And she was always late for our sessions. She would come rushing in, or I'd get a text saying, okay, I'm on the train, I'm almost there. And then we would sit down for our teleconference, and her hair would be flying and she was rushing. And so she came in this one session, she goes, oh my gosh, I'm so upset, I binged. And I said, good, because if it's fairly recent, we can track it. This requires being like, you're like a detective, you put on your detective hat or your scientist hat or your journalist hat. I don't have any judgment about the behaviors. And I try to help people look at this with curiosity, not judgment, because that's how you find the answers. So I said, good, when was it? She said, it was last night. And I said, oh, what did you binge on? And she said, well, it's usually something sweet, and I hate to say this, I'm so embarrassed. I use ketchup all the time. I put ketchup on everything. And I went, oh, okay. So what was happening that day that, of the night that you binged? And she said, well, she worked for a tech company that had a new startup. She said, we were doing a fundraising, and it was really critical because if we did not meet our goal, the company was going to close. So it was very stressful. I said, oh, okay. I said, so did you meet your goal? And she said, no. She said, yes. And I said, oh, but did you know that at the time that you had the binge? And she said, no, I didn't. And I said, oh, okay. So, but when you found out that you guys made your goal, did you celebrate? Well, I mean, that sounds like it was a big deal. She goes, no, our boss said, okay, now we're on to the next thing. And we had to rush to get that done. And I went, oh, so you're always having to catch up.
Crazy.
Catch up.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how it is. It seems so weird. It seems like, oh, that's a stretch. But honestly, I've been doing it years and years. And what happens when you find that connection is actually kind of funny. You know, it kind of makes you laugh. It's like you go, oh, I see it now. I see that the pattern in my life is that I'm just rushing and I'm living as though, you know, there's no sweetness. And we even talked about her boyfriend who worked at the same company. And I said, well, you know, when you're stressed like that, you know, I mean, what's it like with him? She goes, oh, it's horrible. He's worse. He really gets stressed and he disappears. I said, oh, so no sweetness from your sweetheart. She goes, oh, no, all the sweetness leaves. So, see what I'm saying? It's like, this is how it works when you start thinking with that side of your brain.
Yeah, I think what you described, it's, after a while, it feels like being blind for many years. And then it comes a day where you understand everything. And there is kind of light. You bring light into yourself.
Exactly. It's light, not just in terms of illumination, which when you turn on a light, but also in terms of levity.
Yeah.
Things get lighter. It's not so heavy.
Yeah, and you described also that you described the situation that eating disordered people try to not feel special emotions or exact emotions or concrete emotions. And what I observed or kind of observed is that there are many people with eating disorders who are scared of the feeling of emptiness, because when they are alone with themselves, there is no one else and there is no outside world. So there's just you with you. And that's what many people describe as very scary.
Yes, what's scary is that you're faced with the most difficult relationship of all, which is your relationship with yourself. And people are afraid of that loneliness because they don't want to get to know themselves because they're afraid, what if I don't like who I am? Then I'm really stuck. Because again, they're imagining who they are with the voice of the inner critic, you see. And that's not who we really are. The truth of the matter is, we are not our bodies, only our bodies. We are not our emotions. We have all kinds of emotions. We are not even our thoughts. We are more than all of that put together. And when you really do get to access your true self, it's a luminous experience. It's very light. It's very light, but we never get that far because we get to be too afraid that we think that we are the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, or the stories that we learn from other people about who we are. And so it is frightening to begin this recovery journey and go, because it's really a journey towards finding your true essence, who you are. And I've been doing this for 35 years. I've worked with hundreds of people, and I'm here to tell you that the reason why I have stayed in this field for so long and just love the work is that people that struggle with eating disorders and recover are, I believe, the people the world has been waiting for. Every single one has been so absolutely extraordinary. And yes, they are sensitive, but they have a capacity to perceive subtle realities that others don't. And as a result, they think there's something wrong with them. And other people might have said that you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, and have criticized them. And so they believed the stories of other people and then the stories they told themselves when they were quite little. And so over time, it does become frightening. And so it's helpful. One of the things we do at the Light of the Moon Cafe that I just love the most is it's women gathering in circle to help each other along this journey that totally know what it's like. And how it started is I do workshops all over the country and all over the world. And when women come together to support each other in finding out who they really are, because they can reflect back some amazing qualities, immense healing occurs. And so I wasn't sure if that would work online, but it has. And every day there's a forum, and every day I read the posts of these women as they go on this journey. And the responses of the other women is extraordinary because they're able to help point out to them, yeah, I can see you're scared about this, but I can tell from your words that you're also this, 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 and this, and that's amazing. So getting that level of support from women in circle really helps us not be so alone with the struggle, and not think that, oh, there's something wrong with me. And in fact, it takes you to a place where you start to appreciate the gift of your sensitivity, the gift of your emotions, the gift of your intuitions.
I think that there is a way for everybody who has an eating disorder to find and go the way till the point that they can see the gift in this experience. You can see the gift in the experience you've made with the eating disorder. And I also think that you can learn to feel this extraordinariness or something else. How do you call it? And I really believe that eating disordered people can support others someday at a special point in their own process. And that's why I'm so in love with the idea of bringing people or eating disordered people together, because they are on a journey, on an individual journey, but it doesn't mean that they cannot support each other.
Exactly. And in a way, that's what you're doing by giving voice to that, so that people can hear that, yes, it is your unique journey, but you don't have to be alone with it. And there are people that understand. And really, the gifts that are deep inside are not just the gifts you're given, but they're the gifts you have come to give. But to embrace them, sometimes we have to go through, quite a difficult struggle. But when you can understand that there's meaning in the struggle, and that's what makes all the difference, is when you can get to that. And then develop the skills that will help you. There are certain skills. There's one skill I've never seen anyone recover without developing this skill, and it's the skill of assertive communication. And that requires that you identify, accept, and express your feelings in a way that honors your experience and honors the experience of the other person. Because when you can do that, you've put the eating disorder out of a job. It has nothing to do.
There is no work to do anymore. The job is done. Exactly. I think many of the listeners understand the words you've said and described with the stories. And I remember a word you used in the beginning, and it was the universal meaning. So you described the message of your book, and you described it with these words of universal meaning. Can you can you tell us a little bit more about your personal understanding of universal meaning? Because I think, especially in Germany, many people are not sure if they believe in something, or if they believe in God, or if they believe in the universe, or if they believe just in life. Or that's why I think it's important to clarify the point universal meaning, what you mean with this message.
Well, I'm referring to really something that Carl Jung studied, and his whole work was about what he called archetypes. Mm-hmm. And he was the Swiss psychiatrist that created what's now considered Jungian psychology. But he talked about archetypes as essentially they are to the psyche what genes, Genes, are to the body. So he discovered that there are universal concepts that you will find if you crossed all culture and all time. So, for example, if you take the concept of mother, if you could go back in time, you would find that concept. And if you could go into the future, you would find that concept. And if you went to every single culture on this planet, you would find that concept. It's universal. But he sees it as like, and I work with it as an energy. So a lot of times we think of mother as our biological mother, but an archetype goes beyond that to the concept of what I call mothering, which is nurture and comfort. Now, this is really important concept for people with eating disorders because they reach for the concrete physical symbol of mothering, which is food, when really they're wanting the energetic of comfort and being soothed. So that's how we're tapping into this universal concept. And what we know now with epigenetics, for example, is that we used to think that so many of our genes that we were born with are fixed. And that, you're born with the breast cancer gene, you're going to get breast cancer. And now with epigenetics, what we've discovered is no, that's not the case. There are very few genes that are fixed, maybe our eye color and our height, but most genes need first to be expressed before they become demonstrated. So, for example, if you have the breast cancer gene, you're not going to get breast cancer unless that gene gets expressed either through some internal or external event. The internal could be, an emotion, a crisis. The external could be a toxin that gets into your system. So it is with archetypes. They need to be what's called quickened. And so to get back to your original question, when I use stories, that helps quicken those concepts that already exist within every single human being. We are born with them.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I could listen for hours or for years, I think. Listen to your experiences. Because I think 35 years are so in this field, in this deep work and this work with eating disorder people, it feels very special.
Well, unfortunately for me, there was no field when I got involved. So I had to kind of figure it out in my own way. And so I think, nowadays there are so many recipes for how you're supposed to recover. There were no recipes and so, I just went, okay, let's see how this works. And so whatever worked, I stayed with it. And if it didn't work, I stopped doing it.
Yeah. I have a personal interest in another topic, I think. And because in my own experience, I had a very huge struggle at the end of my own process with the topic forgiveness, because I struggled with myself to feel forgiveness. I knew in my mind, what does it mean? And how can I try to forgive? And that I can tell affirmations and that I can use meditation to forgive. But I couldn't feel the forgiveness inside myself. So that was the biggest struggle, I think, to deal with this point of forgiving myself, to experience this eating disorder. So that was a very difficult point, and that's why I'm so interested in your experience with forgiveness. What do you experience with your patients in your treatment center about forgiveness and to forgive yourself and others?
Well, I think of the quote, some have attributed it to Annie Lamott, but I think someone said it before her. Forgiveness is letting go of all hope of a better past. You see, there's a certain level of acceptance that has to happen. And the way I work with this is with the concepts of fate and destiny. So fate is all those things that life gives you that you didn't ask for, right?
Yeah.
These are your parents. This is your ethnicity. This is your culture. These are your siblings. This is where in the world you grew up. This is the poverty. This is the car accident. This is the illness. This is the eating disorder. All that stuff that life delivered up, you didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
Destiny involves your destination, who you are destined to become, where you are destined to go in life. And so we are all given fate and destiny. And again, going back to the myths, they tell us if you do not face your fate, you cannot live your destiny. So if you get stuck bemoaning, why did I do this? Or how come I had to have these parents? Or why did this have to happen to me? You'll never get to fully, completely live your destiny, which is the gift that you were born with and the gift you've come to give. And so I think of forgiveness in that way, that there's stuff that, even stuff that we do because we don't know any better. It's like if the only way you knew how to survive was to develop an eating disorder, well, good for you. The problem is that you don't continue your whole life with that. And you learn to accept that, okay, I got myself an eating disorder. I didn't ask for it. Nobody asks for it. And it was a long, difficult journey to find my way out. But would I know now what I know without that journey? Would I be who I am with these particular strengths and this level of understanding without that journey? And I think most of us have to say no. Those things that were very difficult, those regrets in our lives were probably the biggest teachers we could ever have here in Earth School. It's like, well, how else are we going to learn? And so our lives are stories. And again, back to the fairy tales. You don't ever get a fairy tale that says, oh, she was born into this wonderful family and only wonderful things happened to her and she lived a wonderful life and nothing ever went wrong, because that's not much of a story, right? Who's going to, what kind of story is that? No. Yeah. For all of us, just like in the fairy tales, we're born sometimes to some difficult situations, sometimes not, but always something goes wrong. And out of that something that goes wrong, something incredible can happen.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at forgiveness, is that, part of your fate. Yeah. But here's the cool thing, is it buried right. It's easy to see your fate, right? Destiny is really hard. We never even get the full picture until even if we die. It's like, wait, what was that about? So you know you're living your destiny when you do something and it feels right. Everything in your body goes ding, 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 ding. So that's how you know. It's like connecting the dots. You can't really see the picture. Fate, very easy to see. We can see. It's like, oh my God.
Always, yeah.
But the cool thing is, buried right beneath the fate is your destiny. So in Hawaii, where my clinic is, people a lot of times go to the beach and they have these metal detectors that they're looking like for treasures. And what happens is they go along, and then all of a sudden there's a zzz. Okay, dig there. Don't dig up on the beach. Dig there. There's something there.
Yeah.
So with our faith, that's where you dig.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful story about Hawaii and about the location. Your treatment center is located. And I ask myself, is there a meaning behind the location where this treatment center is located? Because I think Hawaii is, or I imagine that this place on earth is, it's a beautiful landscape, I think. And I imagine it's a special kind of recovery to be at this place.
Yeah, Hawaii, I do have to say, is very healing. The land in and of itself, and the indigenous Hawaiians, they recognize that. They call mana, which is the spirit of the land, and they understand that it's powerful and that it's healing.
Okay, that's nice. And also, Ai Pono. Can you tell the listeners what Ai Pono means?
Yeah, Ai Pono is a Hawaiian word, and it was given to me by a Hawaiian elder. And Ai is the Hawaiian word. Ai is for food and nourishment and eating. Yeah. Pono is a Hawaiian word that means a lot. It's a big word, even though it's only a few letters, because what it means is to follow the right path, to be in wholeness, body, mind, spirit. So when someone says something is pono in Hawaii, they mean that's the right path, that everything has come together on many different dimensions, and it's correct, and it's true.
The truth. That's a deep meaning, I think. And it's also a topic in the process of an eating disorder to find or to remember the truth inside themselves. I have 3 more questions, I think, and I often ask my guests these questions because it's just a nice thing to end up with. With these questions to get the person behind the interview guest. So I would like to ask you what you're grateful for at this moment.
I am grateful that I have work that I love. I don't just like my job. I love my work, and I love the people I get to work with, whether they be other professionals or whether they be clients. I'm so grateful for that.
And can you describe your personal why behind your work or your being from a higher perspective, maybe?
Well, it is my destiny, right? It's a funny thing because like I said, I never thought of myself as a writer. And whenever I used to think about being in the public eye, it made me so anxious. And yet I had to face those fears because it seemed like every which way I turned, it's been like my destiny. And I can look back, I'm in my late 60s now, so I can look back and really look and see things in my life and see how I was born with this. I'm from the island of Guam, a small island. My grandmother was one of the indigenous leaders in the island, and she did amazing, remarkable things, and was held up as a hero from during World War II, leading underground resistance when the island was occupied, to starting the first Girl Scouts, the first high school, the first Red Cross. And she always told me, Anita, we're not on this planet just to take up space. And so from an early age, it was sort of seeded in me that I had a gift, which was to help shift consciousness, to help shift the way people looked at things, because I looked at things differently. And it was a struggle for me. I thought for a long, long time that there was something wrong with me, that I was stupid, because I think inside of the box. But my gift is I think outside of the box. And so, that's my work.
Yeah. And the last thought or question is, if you could teach the world in one day how they can change their consciousnness, with which words you would describe this teaching?
2 words. Compassionate curiosity.
Yeah. Very strong words.
Use that for the lens through which you look at everything, including yourself.
Yeah, it's so important and so powerful. Yeah, and it opens up, I think, doors to the heart, and doors to their own soul. Yeah,
I think so.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. And if any of your listeners want to contact me, they can reach me. My website is dranitajohnston.com, or they can go to lightofthemooncafe.com, or contact me directly at anita@lightofthemooncafe.com.
Yeah, I will put the links, or I will put all links, also the links you've mentioned. I will put them all in the show notes of this podcast episode, so the listeners just can click on the link and will be on your website and on the sites to get more information and more stories about your book and about your work, about your approach, and about the Treatment Center Ai Pono.
Mich interessiert brennend, was du aus dieser Folge, aus diesem Interview mit Anita für dich mitgenommen hast. Denn ich selber habe das Interview, was jetzt schon eine Weile zurückliegt, als sehr, sehr, sehr inspirierend und unglaublich bereichernd empfunden. Vor allem auch durch die Geschichten, die Anita in der Folge erzählt hat. Also ich selber fand es großartig. Die Bewusstseinswoche Essstörung 2018 läuft jetzt noch bis Sonntag. Das heißt, morgen noch ein Beitrag bei Kira auf dem Choose Love Blog und am Sonntag noch ein Artikel von mir. Ich wünsche dir einen schönen Tag, ein Hoch auf uns, deine Kira.